that, when I was preparing for the lecture this evening, for this evening, I was going to cover the topic of group counseling and how that, we use that modality to reach clients, help them grow, develop, and enact change in their own lives and those around them. But I didn't feel inspired. So I decided just to put a collection of things that I thought were really important for folks to know about the helping profession, what it is to be a counselor. And so that's what I titled this presentation here. What does it mean to be a therapist? And Dr. Wentz and myself have been a therapist for a number of years now. We have active caseloads. We've worked in a variety of clinical settings, so we have a wealth of knowledge and experience. And it seemed like something that was more interesting to me than not the group isn't really important, because it is. It's one of my favorite modalities for therapy. But like I said, I was feeling more inspired toward a topic that was broad and open. And really, what I'm trying to get to is some of the less academic, less research-based things that you'll come across in your textbooks and through lectures. Things that we could, from our personal experience as therapists, help you grasp. And so by paving the way for those of you who are going to become helpers in whatever capacity, I know not everybody is in human services here, but even if you're in the helping field in some capacity, that could be in the medical field, radiology. I know we've got a lot of folks from paramedics that are in our program. These topics will still be valid and of value to you. Okay, so and keep in mind, the way you get credit for attending the symposium is I'll give you a password verbally, and all you're going to do is upload that password into your assignments for whatever course you need to. If you have multiple courses, that's fine. You use the same password and you submit that. That way I know you attended live. For those folks who weren't able to make it, this recording will be uploaded to YouTube, to my channel, and they can review it there, and then they can submit a written summary of the presentation to participate that way. So thanks for fielding questions. So we're kind of play co-host, where Dr. Wentz will be answering questions for me, and then maybe we'll have some dialogue back and forth as we go along. So what does it mean to be a therapist? And I'm asking this question, and you guys can use the chat function to what do you guys think it is to be a therapist? Or maybe you've had experience in your own, and what were the experiences that you had, and what did it mean for you? And I don't want not too much detail. I'm talking about what does it mean to be a therapist? I want to preface that because I don't want people to reveal too much in a public space that might not be conducive to this kind of an interaction. I hope everyone understands that. Okay, good. Yeah, compassionate, encourage, supportive, motivating, helping people with troubles. Yeah. Providing mental health, active listening, supportive and listening. Good. I'm seeing a lot of listening to hear what's being said. Yeah. So before we get started, what it means to be a therapist, I'd like to talk about some things. What you don't do, what it means not to do as a therapist. We go to school for a lot of top years, 4 years undergrad, 3 years graduate school, 2 years postgraduate school. We're up to what is that, 9 years? And then to get to be a supervisor is 3 more years on top of that. So we're talking like 11 years. And a lot of the things that are taught are helpful, but it doesn't encompass the entire scope of what it means to be a therapist. And one of the things we don't do is we don't lecture. We don't tell them clients what to do. We don't fix people's lives. We don't give advice. Now, when I say you don't, there's an exception to every rule. Sometimes the thing you're not supposed to do is the thing you're supposed to do, okay? That wisdom will give you the discernment to decide when that time is. But in the beginning, we tell you don't, because we don't want you to make these mistakes early on. You will come into your own. This is why we have clinical supervision for a number of years, to grow into your own version of your best self as a therapist. That doesn't mean you don't have your own personal values and attitudes and beliefs, but as a therapist, we adopt kind of and more encompassing, more accepting, because we cannot remove our biases from our lives. We can only try to be aware of them, so we're not kind of infringing on other people and acting in a way that is not conducive to the change process, not being open. So we adopt attitudes, beliefs, and a way of being and an ethos that informs our practice. And that's so important to remember, because it's so easy to slip back into your kind of personal ego values and perspective. And I'll tell you, when I'm in therapy, I am a lot of who I am. I like to think I'm my best self. And then when I leave my therapy office, I get to be me again. And if that makes sense, I'm both people, but one has more of a softer, kinder, gentler, warmer, more congenial attitude than I do in my personal life, because out in the world, there's a lot of threats I have to face, politics and my professional responsibilities and rules and regulations. In the therapy office, it's me and an individual that are trying to really connect in a deep, meaningful, authentic way. And I've got to let my guard down for them to let their guard down. But that doesn't mean the session becomes about me. So I got this quote from Jung's The Undiscovered Self, and here's a great picture of some great early psychologists. Over on the left-hand side is, who knows who that is over here on this side? Can you see my mouse, hopefully? Don't answer. Yeah, no. Don't answer, Dr. Wentz. I know you know. So this is Carl Jung here over on the right, or on my right. I don't know what's. And he's a Swiss psychiatrist from where is he from? Zurich. Okay, anybody know the guy in the middle? Okay, that's Stanley Hall, kind of American psychologist, I think studied and practiced taught at Stanford or Harvard, excuse me, and was kind of devoted to the psychology of lifespan development. And then over on your left is the great father of psychology, psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. So the Austrian great psychologist. And if you haven't read any of theirs in their original, I would really encourage you. What the textbook gives you is a pared down version. It's incredibly dense material. I think it has something to do with the German language. Both of those great psychologists spoke German. And of course, Swiss German is a little different. I couldn't tell you the difference, but I know that there are differences. And I think something about that lends itself to a deep reflective analysis of the human experience, and it's really helpful. So when you read a translation, because I don't know German or Swiss German for that matter, I really have to read it over and over. But I wanted to share this quote with you by Carl Jung, and it says, "People think that you only have to tell a person what he or she ought to do in order to put them on the right track. But whenever he or she can or will do, what will do is another matter. The psychologist has come to see that nothing is achieved by telling, persuading, admonishing, giving good advice. He must acquaint himself with all the particulars and have an authentic knowledge of the psychic inventory of his patient. He has therefore to relate to the individuality of the sufferer and feel his way into all the nooks and crannies of his mind to the degree that far exceeds the capacity of a teacher or even a director de conseil." So director de conseil is like your directing mind, your own, and there's a risk there that you get lost in the patient's mind. And if this is a pathological mind, well, it's even greater risk. So, but I think it's so telling. And of course, I'm trying to use more modern language. I know he is only referring to he and hims, and I'm trying to, but it's hard to, as I'm reading it, to try to correct that. So forgive me. But what do you guys think about that? That you just, if we just had to tell them, we just put billboards up, right? Just, send people emails with bulletin things and things they need to do in their life. They do them, and then they're cured, right? but there's a reason they're not doing those things. What do you think some of those reasons might be? What are some aspects of why they are in this situation they're in? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Yeah, give them tools. As things were scrolling, I wasn't able to read, so I'm sorry if I haven't caught up. But Dr. Wenzel do a good job keep things going. Hiding from the truth, yeah. Feel comfortable in their situation. Okay, yeah, even if it's not maybe ideal.
Great point. Reluctance to change.
Yeah.
Although, you know, particularly in the personality that I have as a clinician, the reluctance to change it speaks to something else that may be happening, and not necessarily an individual being rigid in the process of changing, because even the reluctance itself is functioning for something.
Right.
And part of our job, as Mr. Sita was saying, is and of course, John, is this idea that we as therapists and clinicians must be doing our work in order to begin helping the individual acquire that knowledge necessary to produce that change. And oftentimes that knowledge is translated into consciousness. What is it that I'm doing to myself? Even the question of why is it that what's the purpose for me to be reluctant to change what is happening in my life? When an individual actually faces those type of questions, you will encounter someone that is liberating themselves. So as Mr. Sita was saying, nowadays, and I'm sure it has happened to him as well, as a master clinician, we don't go into a session with the mentality of you need to change. We go into at least in my part, I go into a session thinking, how do you need me today? And what can I actually serve you for, rather than you must do A, B, C, D in order to change. Now, there are particular cases, especially working with adolescents, where the ABC list is super useful just because they are still in the process of developing their identity and who they are. But when I work with adults, I let them be, I allow them to manifest the true self, while encouraging the acceptance of what they are doing and the behavior they are producing that are cooperating to the current situation. Oftentimes, you know, I have had clients that have had a session with me and never come back. But I'm sure that even with that session, they go home thinking, yes, indeed, I'm doing this to myself. So I guess the question of you know, what does it mean to be a therapist? It's heavy in its very nature, because you got to consider who you are as a therapist, your skills, your level of comfortness to be present with the other, the level of your confidence in being a recipient of the other experience, your level of and abilities of being an empathic individual through listening, through questioning. There are not judgmental, but instead questions that will guide the individual to encounter who or she or they are. So when you begin positioning yourself into that openness, what you create, it's a beautiful interaction, an interaction between you and another human being. Now, one of the challenges, and I don't know what you think about this, Mr. Sita, but one of the challenges that I encounter currently in our society is that most of the people are looking for us to fix them.
Yeah, they think that somehow we have some hidden knowledge. We would be so rich. We would be, I mean, ungodly, shamefully rich if we could do that. That doesn't exist, and I hope it never does, because it would remove people's free will. Who are we to transform to somebody into what we think is a healthy human being? That's something, that's a road and a discovery that they have to make for themselves. We're there to support them in that process, provide different mechanisms to help them achieve that when appropriate. But so much of that is first building a connection that can tolerate them changing. So you might notice when you're with your friends, you have a certain way of being, and then with your family, and then of course, maybe in academic setting, different, because there's different rules, there's different masks that we wear. And then I want to get to that as we proceed. So I thought about this image this morning because I was thinking, first, before we get into all the things that we can do to help someone, is that we need to learn to quiet our mind, to quiet the chatter, what the Buddhists call the monkey mind, the mind that jumps from thought to thought, like a monkey jumps from branch to branch. And one of the images in one of the books that I read, I studied Buddhism for a number of years on my own, and I also studied with the Raja Kumari nun, meditation, and all kinds of different really unique experiences. But really learning to quiet my own thoughts. And the metaphor they use is a still pond. The still pond is your mind. And when your mind is tumultuous and there's thoughts coming in and out, you're not focused, you're not present, and you're not aware. And so you can't be present for the client who's in front of you. And the quote that I remember from one of those texts is that the mind is like a still pond. It reflects the birds. It doesn't try to reach out and grab the birds from the image. It just reflects. And so much of what we do as therapists is from a still point, from a relaxed, open mind. We observe, and then we reflect back to help this person understand themselves. We almost become like an X-ray machine in that way. Oh, I'm starting to see there's this theme that you're angry with yourself or with your body or with your family, something like that. And through this act of discovery that you're doing mutually with one another, you so start to increase the individual awareness, and then you let them do what they will with it. They could decide, I don't want to do anything about it. Or they might decide, I want to change. And that's really up to them. This is a beautiful picture. And this is kind of what I would say is sometimes how our mind is filled with thoughts and assumptions and distractions and planning ahead, maybe anxiety, ruminating on our own thoughts. And I saw that I had a picture of a kind of a stirred up pond, but I thought this was more beautiful, but it also elucidated the same kind of metaphor that I was trying to get at. And I like to give people credit, so I found this online. Nicola Montoyne, she was based in Tuscany, and she creates paintings of animals, flowers, and other nature scenes inspired by the style of ancient Buddhist Thakang paintings. Okay, so anybody have any questions before I move on? And so you might be asking or thinking, well, how do I quiet my mind? How do I get to the place of serenity where I can be of service to another person without my own mind interfering, without my own thoughts? I took this picture when I visited France a few years ago. I got up really early because I was jet lagged. So my mom, the time was all off. It's probably 5 in the morning. And it was great. This is that's the Art Institute of France, and behind me was the Louvre, which I was planning to go to, but it was so early, it wasn't open, and the plaza was completely empty. And I remember thinking when I took this picture, and I looked at it later, and I saw the reflection here. It almost looks like a Monet. I thought how interesting about how the stillness of the water was, because the boats weren't moving around, there was nobody paddling. And I was able to capture this reflection, and I thought how synergistic, my experience was, because I also rented a car. If you ever drive in Paris, I don't recommend it. I drove to Switzerland, which is not too far, and from there, I think about 6 hours. But I went through Germany, and anyway, I had a good time. And I visited Jung's hometown, and where he practiced as a psychiatrist at the Beachtsley Sanatorium, which is still active in there. I saw patients in it that were in part of the hospital, and then his residency that he shared with Emma Jung, his wife, and then he kind of had like a little separate sanctuary that he built on Lake Zurich there. I visited that as well. So beautiful experience. And it's all kind of all bringing me back to this moment when I thought about it today. So I tried to, one of the reasons I'm trying to share some personal experiences, because part of the underlying theme of therapy is being genuine and also being vulnerable to a degree that is useful. We don't want to make it about us, but it can be useful. This is kind of I've already watched this old series on HBO called In Treatment, and I love the show, but then every time, but I'm just like screaming at it. My brother-in-law was an airplane mechanic in the Air Force, and every time we watched like a movie like Top Gun or Screaming Eagles or whatever, one of those jet fighter movies, he would just be jumping out of his seat screaming how this is wrong, or they just use a different plane here, and I can't believe how unrealistic this is. I kind of had the same experience when I watch In Treatment, where I'm like, no, you'd never do that. And I can't remember this guy's name. Does anyone remember his name? I think it was like Michael or some very plain name, or Jack or something. But I remember thinking, this guy he's done everything wrong, relationship with his clients had poor boundaries, relationship with his supervisor was very poor. It had poor boundaries as well, but makes for good drama. As a therapist, you shouldn't be having a lot of drama with your patients or your supervisor. If you do, then there's something going on. So while we have a dramatization, it shouldn't look like that. And I remember thinking, and I was in graduate school, I think, when this came out a long time ago now. I was like, man, this guy's so cool. And now I think this guy's terrible. He's like the worst therapist ever. He's very charming, but that doesn't really make a good therapist. Okay. So when we get to talking about vulnerability, how do we get people to open up? And one of the ways is, some folks in my supervision group talk about that imposter syndrome. They're new therapists. They don't feel like they are therapists. They doubt and question themselves. Well, let me back up a second, because I think I'm moving too fast here. So back to quieting your mind. Sorry, before we jump into this other topic. I want you guys to, if this is going to be your thing, if you're going to go into the helping field and you want to be present, you want to be able to affect change, first of all, you've got to be centered. You have to be grounded, and part of that is a healthy lifestyle, what we call self-care in the field. Make sure you're getting enough rest, exercise. You have a life that is reasonably safe and stable, because you can't be injecting heroin in your arm and then going into session, or living in your car. Those kinds of, you have to have those basic needs met. And one of the ways that I learned was studying Buddhist meditation and Hindu meditation is I adopted some techniques, just deep breathing techniques. And I also used some little tools here. And I'm going to just demonstrate a couple of things. This is part of me being vulnerable. I live alone, so I just thought I saw somebody. If you guys see somebody, let me know. This is a little bell. This was a gift from a friend of mine. And I'll use this before I started meditation, a breathing exercise, and I'll just let it ring out here and you guys can hear it. It's still ringing out, if you guys can hear it. So one of those it allows us to focus. If you have trouble focusing, giving your mind something to grasp onto and stay focused. A lot of that is the breath work, taking deep breaths, but also holding them for a few seconds and relax and letting them out. And this will, kind of activates your natural relaxation response. And this is one tool that I use. And then I also have a singing bowl that actually a friend of mine who was in the Marines, when he was on leave, when he was in Afghanistan, he bought it for me. He put it all the way from Tibet to Afghanistan, and then when he later came back to the States and brought it to me as a gift. So it's a very special token and gift that he gave to me. And this is a bronze bowl that has some, I don't know if you can see it there, but it's got some like little Buddhas in there. Kind of think there's 5. And the act of utilizing this, if you're not focused, you'll break your own concentration and it will not resonate. So I'll just demonstrate it to you. And I used to bring this with me to group, and we would practice it, and everybody kind of get frustrated. And I've used it for a long time, so I've got a kind of a good technique with it. So I'll just demonstrate for you here for a second. Hopefully it comes through the sound. I'm not sure what it's going to sound like. And you can keep that going quite a long time. You can't I guess rub the dowel too hard or too soft. It has to maintain a specific kind of pressure and speed. Otherwise, it will. And you can really get it to get going pretty loud. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Yeah, yoga's a great one. So these are just some examples of things, but whatever, I would say that really taught me mindfulness was working on cars when I was a kid. And my brother, Randy, older brother, he liked to do build hot rods and fix up cars. And I kind of inherited that passion for fixing up old things. I like renewing things. My house was built in the 40s, and I pretty much made up every part of it, and did some of the work myself. Likewise, I have an old Jeep 1960 CJ5 that I restored. And so and when you're working with tools and in an uncomfortable situation, if you're under, if you're turn wrenches and you're under a hot car and it's dripping oil in your face, something like that, you really have to learn how to relax and be patient with yourself in the whole process, and not get frustrated. Otherwise, the whole thing just becomes untenable. So I think working on cars, my brother would tell me, he'd give me all these reminders like, don't crank it too hard, don't break the bowl, which I used to do all the time because I thought tighter was better when I was a kid. And then as I got older, we rebuild motors, and things have to be clean, they have to be precise, you have to torque them down to a specific pressure. We build sleeper cars. Anybody know what a sleeper car is? Any folks had dads or hot rods? Well, people who build hot rods is like, you'll build like a car, like a stock car, it won't have anything flashing on it, but the motor inside is like tricked out, and maybe it has an upgraded carburetor, bored out, pistons, things like that. And so people used to race for money and things like that. We don't do that. Well, maybe people do nowadays, but I'm too old for that. And so that's some of the things that I enjoyed when I was younger. And I still do to some degree, but of course I have other responsibilities and interests. But I remember thinking, like learning how to use tools and being patient and finding the right technique and way to go about fixing something helped me out a lot in terms of quieting my mind and learning how to focus. And also being relaxed. There's a beautiful secret to action. And this is true of people who play music or athletics. If you're all in it, if you want things to be perfect, you're going to be tense and rigid and clumsy because you just like, I've got to, I noticed this too when I first started lecturing as a professor. I wanted things to be just right. And I wanted everything. I was so smart. And I was like, just be yourself. And through that, this kind of natural harmony will ensue, and the experience will be gratifying for you as well as your students or the audience. And rather than being forced and prescribed and really disingenuous. So keep that in mind for you perfectionists here. I know when you guys are submitting papers, that's a different story because I know I demand a lot, but we're talking about when you're in action. So getting back to being vulnerable. So some folks, when they come into therapy, it's so difficult for them to open up, not just with you, with themselves. And so we have to find ways to kind of help them discover themselves, who they are when they're not around somebody, who are they, who not their ego so much to say, Carl Jung would say, not, excuse me, Carl Jung, but Carl Rogers, they both have the same first name, would talk about unmasking the individual. And this is something like disarming the ego. The ego, you could think of it as the way Freud analogies is as this representative that presents you to the world, but isn't you in your total sum, because you are so much more than what we can see or even experience it in any one setting. There's just a vast and depthness to us that extends beyond just everyday experience. So as we ask them to unmask themselves, we, to a degree, have to be open to that, non-judgmental, accepting, because some things they might say might kind of offend our personal value system. But remember, as a therapist, we have another set of rules that we work towards and try to maintain, or we aspire to, if we don't always meet them, because everyone has scruples, and we have things that we can and can't tolerate. But the more you work with folks, the more you start to see that we're very similar in a way, that we're hiding ourselves from the world or from ourselves. And it's so important that we make a deep, meaningful connection to start the work, because then this self-examination, this awareness that emerges between this phenomenon we call therapy, new things can happen, new experiences, and the individual changes as a result of that. Do you have any comments, Dr. Wendt, before I continue? I know you guys are keeping them busy with the text, but I just want to give them an opportunity to speak some of these topics. I'm sure your mind's going there too.
Of course, when you were talking about using the singing bowl or the bell as a way of creating this harmonious music that will help you to focus, I started remembering the entire theory of solfeggio, which is an Italian word that describes the different levels of a vowel in hertz. And this is very important because there is a huge body of research in how the different types of notes in different hertz or measurements of sound can indeed regulate the waves of our brain that can centralize and focus individuals. And as a matter of fact, if you ever had the opportunity to have sessions with me, you will see that in every single session, there are theta waves playing in the background the entire session for every single one of my clients. I change that to alpha waves oftentimes when the challenge is, it's different, when we are dealing with different challenges, but you will always hear the music. And I adopted a practice because I was one of those individuals that had difficulties focusing in terms of calming my mind. And when I started utilizing this approach, what I noticed is that I was absolutely present, almost as if the effect, it had actually a bidirectional effect. It allowed me to focus and calm my mind, almost as an effortless way of being present to the other. I call it the forceful relaxing and meditating process. So you just go into the modality and the state. So of being open and recipient of anything that is happening in the session. So I totally agree that we need to find ways of relaxing ourselves. Even when I'm, for example, creating a quiz or reading even your assignments guide, I get my headphones and put an alpha or beta wave, depending on how I feel. And I can totally block myself outside of the external world and focus on what I'm doing. So in my particular way of seeing how our field is evolving, creativity, as Kim mentioned in our chat, and the ability of mastering a part of the arts is going to be super helpful for our work. So music and the waves is one of the things that I utilize. And of course, I'm a certified hypnotist, so I utilized that process as well. So I totally agree with you that, and even I think it was Patrick's wife utilizes actually the song process, which is done through the gong. a powerful instrument that will absolutely guide your mind without any questions. How do I know that? Because I used to have received sessions with a gong, and it's called, a shower of sound. You place yourself in the middle of 10 or 20 plates around you, and then the master goes around and play all of them at the same time. Your mind, sorry, that was my cat. Your mind has no option other than mimic the wave of the gong. So you relax profoundly. So it's a very interesting way of supporting individuals that face difficulties with their own ways of calming their minds, especially those individuals that are constantly struggling with obsessive compulsive thoughts. That's a beautiful way. So yeah, I agree. Beautiful ways of supporting others.
And one of the things when I was talking about unmasking or thinking about this, thank you, Dr. Wentz, for your comments. I started thinking about the pandemic and then how we were wearing masks and how, a lot of folks really resisted. I hated wearing a mask, but I wore it. And then I thought some people really liked it and they still wear it. And especially I noticed with my teens and adolescents, and they like to hide. They put hoodies on and then masks, and then they might have glasses, and it's like they're completely, and they kind of enjoy that anonymity because being vulnerable can be scary. And so it's not always, I think it's necessary to allow yourself to be vulnerable and authentic in your life, especially those that are important to you. But it's not always safe to do that. So I recognize that. But what I'm saying is specifically in terms of working with folks in therapy and creating an environment where that is necessary part of the change process.
And one of the elements that I always every single one of you guys is unmasking or supporting the process of encountering another human being and reach their true self takes a lot of time. So that is guided by your ability to create a powerful relationship so that whatever is going to come out can be protected, meaning I'm not going to ask you or confront you because I just noticed that you are lying to yourself, but rather your intentionality for doing that must be driven from a non-judgmental place. I'm not asking or doing or confronting you in order for you to see what's happening to you because I want to and because I just saw it, but truly because my heart and my intention is for you to see who you are and embrace that part of you into a new one if you want to. If not, that's totally fine, but at least for you to see it in a very different way. So unmasking requires timing and a powerful relationship with the other.
Yeah.
So that it sustains that process.
That's okay. So I'll leave you to answer some of those questions as I continue to lecture, Dr. Wentz. Thank you. So I took this picture. Those of you who live in the Southern Nevada will recognize Red Rock here on one of my hikes. It was a beautiful day, and I felt, took a seat and just kind of enjoy the view. And when I was doing a little preparation for this evening's talk, I saw a quote and I kind of modified it here. Quiet the mind and the heart will speak. So not only are you, as you're centered and focused and relaxed, the client takes on those cues from you as well. If you're anxious or distracted, the client will sense that and might feel like they're not important or you have other things to attend to. So, we have to attend to our own self before we can be ready to help somebody get to that spot. A lot of my clients who have a lot of issues with anxiety will say, "Oh, I feel so much calmer when I leave my office." I'm like, okay, that's because I've got, some of the beta waves playing as well. I've got my music going to kind of set the mood. The lighting is not harsh, it's soft. it's getting really hard to find incandescent light bulbs. LEDs are terrible for creating an environment of relaxing the eyes and things like that. It's quiet, it's clean, it's comfortable, it smells nice. You know, you don't want to have food and things like that. Like, you had like an onion sandwich right before your client comes. Those things distract from the environment. So it's really important to set the mood. And then if things go well and you were able to create that connection, I think growth emerges naturally. Just like plants, we don't really have to do a whole lot. They do it on their own. This is a picture. I have a fig tree in my front yard. When I moved into my house 12 years ago, it was here and it's thriving and doing well. It grows. It produces about 3 different. I guess you could say it fruits 3 times a year, which is pretty amazing. The neighbors come around and collect them. And then of course the birds and the ants have fun with that too. But it never ceases to amaze me that this beautiful fruit tree is able to flower and produce this in such a harsh desert environment. You know, it just seems like it just sucks up the sun and just and I think when we create the right environment in therapy, this emerges naturally. So you're not trying to force therapy or force change. It's just a natural process. Anybody have any specific questions about what we're getting to here? I don't have much more in terms of slides. I didn't really want to use a lot of notes and jargon. I just wanted to kind of connect with you guys and bring some of the kind of finer points of therapy forward, so you could be familiar with those as you're going forward and kind of putting all this information that we're providing to you over your coursework.
I want to share with Madison.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Dr. Wentz.
Let me hold on.
The audio is coming in and out.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to just. Can everyone hear me now? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
that's much better. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So why is not everyone telling me that you cannot hear me?
Well, it was coming. Sometimes it was a fine, and other times. It was
Okay, great, thank you. So Madison, beautiful question. Isn't it truly that providing those tools to our clients generates or provides insightful changes? Or is it that we are selling a placebo just because we have come to normalize that those tools as they are helpful? Here is the point with the sounds, especially the gong. It has been studied actually in a neurological sense. Neurologists have noticed the connections in the brain, in areas of the brain where the gong is playing, are activated, creating new neural paths. So rather than being a placebo effect, it's a tool that can help you as a therapist and help your client explore what appears to be blocking the ability to encounter the solution for the problem or the disorder that you're working with. So some of those tools, specifically in music, and I'm just sharing about music because that's what I had been investing a lot of my time. They work not because I say so, but because the research have pointed that out to the public. So the challenge, though, is that when a client comes to you, and this client is utilizing a health insurance, for example, to see you, you can come back to the insurance and send a note to them saying, we utilize an hour of a gong bath so that the client blockages in their neural connections are blocked. Because then they will come back to you and say, no, we want to see CBT in use. Why are you not using that? So our society, specifically our counseling field for everyone, guys, is being limited by politics in health. So the goal, though, is we want to get our client in the place that they want to be in terms of feeling healthy, psychologically speaking. Yes, we do. So because I guess I'm more daring and defiant, utilize the tools that have been given to me as a way of supporting the goal of my client. Is it that I'm actually suggesting in your early career to be that way? No, because someone can come in and slap your hand for being daring. But don't kill your ability to see what other tools are out there. They can actually support you. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. I'm sharing this in the moment of openness and transparency. A colleague of mine from New Mexico posted a request for individuals that have utilized family constellations in therapy. And maybe you haven't heard about this because family constellations comes from Sweden, from Barkstor, an individual that has created this approach of healing the generational trauma by a process of experiencing that. Not very common in the United States, actually not common at all. So when I saw the post, I got excited because I actually was trained in this modality in Mexico. So you begin noticing that new modalities that have been restricted are now kicking in our system to support the well-being of the individual that we support. So yes, it's good to utilize best practices. And yes, it is also good for you to challenge yourself and bring the tools necessary to support your clients.
We become kind of blinded by just you being trained from you can say an American academic perspective. And so there are lots of researchers and studies that are done outside of the United States that are useful and valid. But as we are educated within this system, sometimes we are not exposed to all kinds of different useful practices and interventions. So, it's great to keep an open mind, and Dr. Wentz is definitely an avid reader and student from different perspectives, which has opened my eyes as well. Yeah, that whole ketamine thing is I'm very skeptical. I'm not saying it can't be useful, but of course I see a repetition of the opiate crisis, where because ketamine has been an illicit substance for years, or pharmaceutical that have been abused like opiates. And while I think there's a place for everything, I don't see why you have to use ketamine to make headway. I think that there's much better ways of reaching the subconscious mind healing without the use of these very powerful psychedelics. Not that I don't think it can't be helpful. I'm sure there are times and things like that, but when it exploded, it's so many people. You could just get it by mail and do a therapy session over the phone, and you got your ketamine script. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound safe. I started looking into it just as out of curiosity. I wanted to see how easy it was. And it was like, you could just go online and they'll send you it into the mail, and you do a therapy session with supposedly a therapist that has been trained to provide support for ketamine therapy, and there you're off. Okay, so since I've been talking about my Jeep so much, I wanted to show you guys a picture of it. This is the one I take off road once in a while, and sometimes it leaves me stranded. And this also taught me patience too. If you want to drive a vehicle that's over, 1960s, so for 63 years old, you're going to have problems. This time, I think the battery wasn't tied down well, which I knew, but I forgot, and it pulled the alternator wire out of it. And luckily, some guys came along and helped me out and get it started. And I actually had to have it towed because I wasn't sure what it was. But at least I got it right back to civilization. So, and yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to use things that were kind of more relevant to me, not just a bunch of boring, PowerPoint by death type things. So I hope you guys appreciate the presentation. And I wanted to also go into, before I get into this last thing, and so I guess the reason I was showing the Jeep kind of when I had it pristine and then when it broke down on me, is to, when you're working with folks, human beings, you have to accept both aspects of them. The full encompass the full nature of what it is to be a human being. Then we could say that we're both good and bad, or light and dark, or however you want to put it. But if you can't accept those things and they really irritate you, you're not going to be motivated to help people to change. You're going to be irritated by them. They'll disappoint you because your values that maybe you can't even live up to, they can't meet. And so I want to talk about another very important aspect of being an effective therapist is real, and as things change, because things are changing quite rapidly from the time I entered the profession till today, is different social attitudes, beliefs, ways of expressing themselves. You don't have to, that doesn't have to be your thing, but you have to be able to work with people and maintain that neutrality and non-judgment, and also compassion for their experience, whatever it is. And sometimes it can be very pious, very serious, and other times it can be very cynical and almost border on the absurd. But if you can't put yourself in a position where you can be compassionate, and compassion means to feel with, not your feelings or your opinion or your sympathy, but feeling their feeling for the situation, you're going to have a hard time connecting to them. And and one of the things that helped me understand this kind of elusive, abstract idea is art, and poetry is kind of the medium that I prefer. So I wanted to share a poem with you by Robinson Jeffers. He's a California poet. So when he talks about colors, he's talking about the California landscape. And it's called Natural Music. And it goes like this. The old voice of the ocean, the bird chatter of little rivers. Winter has given them gold for silver, sustained their waters, and bladed green for brown to line their banks. From different throats intone one language. So I believe if we are strong enough to listen without division or desire and terror to the storm of sick nation and the rage of hunger-smitten cities, those voices also will be found clean as a child's, or like some girl's breathing who dances alone by the ocean shore, dreaming of lovers. So what does that mean to you? Anybody have any thoughts, or how do you experience it? It's one of my favorite poems. When I get too caught up in life and strife, I go to art. This becomes my outlet. It becomes my sanctuary, because then I realize what's really important here. And for me, it's that the beauty and the horror are one and the same. They're two sides of the same coin. And if you're not able to accept and hear these things, that you're going to hear really difficult things coming from clients, their personal experience. And if you recoil either from their actions or actions that have been done to them, or experiences, vice versa, that you're going to break that connection. You have to stay present. You have to stay interested. You have to be willing to hear these horrific things sometimes. And sometimes they're not horrific. It's just kind of some extreme cases. But it can just be their own reaction to something that seems banal to you. But if for them, it was life-altering, life-changing. And there's a lot of poems and music this way that encourage us to embrace life fully. And I think one of the gifts of being a therapist, which I didn't anticipate, I just wanted to help somebody. I wanted to help people. And that's not enough, just so you know. It has got to be more than that, because it's a lot tougher than just, that's going to wear thin real quick. I want to help people. You have to have something, some ethos of your own, so you can avoid becoming a client yourself, if that makes sense. It's something that supports you when there's nothing below you. A belief, attitude, a belief. Some of the great religious institutions sometimes have given those in the past, but we are supporting people who are, and sometimes very, very desperate, and we cannot be moved. We cannot be pushed around. We have to stay centered. Otherwise, we lose our effectiveness towards them. We're on the roller coaster with them. We get lost in their own mind.
And Mr. Sita, you have pointed out a very essential element in our career, and for all of you that will become counselors at one point. The work with yourself will never end. You will need to continuously explore your limitations, your belief systems, your intersectionalities, your privileges, the lack of those. Who are you in the society? How are you actually a driving force in this system? This is an ongoing and forever process that is going to take place if you continue as a clinician or as a counselor. Having good intentions of supporting others may only be that, the intentions of supporting others, but if you don't encounter who you are, so that you can give your essence in the relationship that you will form with that individual that is seeking your support, your intentionality may just not be enough to produce or to allow the other to manifest the true self. Oftentimes, or at least to the conclusion that I have arrived in this moment in my life, is that many of us are only looking for people to listen to us because nobody has time anymore. So imagine if you transform the ability to listen, because you have already discovered that ability in you. You have worked that ability out by understanding what makes noise in your heart, in your head, in your soul, by understanding your own traumas and allowing that to be, while putting it aside, to allow the other to manifest his or her own. That is the most beautiful process that you will encounter in the human relations. Your ability to be present for the other. And this presence is not just the simple word presence, but it requires your understanding of who you are. How is it that I, as an individual, relate to the other, and that relation that I'm creating impacts the individual? Even in this very moment, you are here listening to two individuals that happen to be your professors, and that without you, we wouldn't be professors because we need you. So this idea of the relationship, who are we, departing from who you are. Very, very similar relationship when we think about helping others. I am because you are. And in that process for everyone, when we begin thinking about it, our true selves continue manifesting as the other, quote unquote, the client teaches more of ourselves in an hour. So I oftentimes, thank my clients when, the session is done, because I learn a lot about myself in every single session. And of course, the idea is to be the one that remains professional in order for them to learn from you as well. But what it means to be a therapist is going to be developed by your very own style, by your very own experiences, by your very own voice, by these beautiful phrases that you utilize constantly in order to allow the individuals to manifest, by the process of the way you ask questions. That is very unique for each and every one of you.
So my invitation will be to always pay attention to those uniqueness of yours and never let those go, because that's actually what makes you a therapist, very different from everyone else. Besides the niche that you want to work on and the population that you want to work with, it's about your own essence and how that's activated as energy to be a transformational factor in the relationship with the other. So keep that always in mind. You are unique.
Go ahead, sorry, Dr. Wentz.
Keep that in mind. You are unique, and that is energy that transforms the relationship with the other.
Yeah, very, very sage words, and so important to not forget who you are. I notice when new therapists try to be, they take on this like persona. They're like, I'm a therapist. I'm very calm. I'm very nice. I'm like, that's not authentic. Be more of yourself. That's necessary. So any therapist, Dr. Winston, I know very well. One of the most important things she said, and I was her supervisor, was your personality is one of the most important things that you bring to therapy as a therapist. And I thought that's so true. And I wanted to answer a question Joshua put. Can you give me an example of an ethos that can help you stay grounded? So when we talk about ethos, that's like a characteristic, a spirit. It could be a cultural value. It could be a personal, individual, like your own personal way of being, your own values. And integrity, I think, is one, because if you don't have integrity, you don't have strength. You lack the ability to carry things, heavy loads. But if your life is aligned in such a way that it's integrated with who you are as a person, your profession, your professional life, your personal life, and your deeply interior life, your internal world, if those things are aligned, you become almost like a beacon to other people. They seek you for support, and you in turn provide that, and they provide it for you. But if your life is chaotic and you are, I don't know if anybody knows the term "three sheets to the wind." If anybody who knows that means, it's an old expression from sailing. And when the sails are not lashed, they're just flapping, and so when people, it's used as a term to mean you're drunk, so the ship is just kind of all over the place. So you've got to have that kind of discipline and consistency in your life in order to be useful. Things happen in your life. They're always going to happen. They're going to keep happening. They're never going to stop happening. People are going to come in and out of your lives. Relationships will begin, they'll end. People will be born, they will die. Careers will start, they will transition, and they will end. Some of the most beautiful people I met in my life were on their way out retiring. And I was like, I'm just getting into this and you guys are leaving me. And I felt kind of a sense of loss, like, oh, but I still hold the lessons they taught me as when I got into academia. Because I'll tell you, academia, while it's awesome in a lot of different ways, the kind of political life and things like that are real, and they can be just as jarring as any kind of institution where politics plays a role. I try to protect the students from that as much as possible, but we've got budgets and we've got competing personalities and values that collide. And I think, well, the most important thing I can focus on is my students, and as long as I'm doing right by them, I don't care what else happens. But of course, I got to stay here too, so I got to protect my own position within in this environment as well. Hopefully I answered that. Some other examples could be, I said integrity is one. I think another one is, what is something that you believe in that gives you strength? One of the things I always think of is my mother. My mother worked 2 full-time jobs. She had 4 children by the time she met my father in her 30s, and they married, they had me. I'm the youngest of my 5 siblings. And I think she was illiterate. She immigrated from Mexico. Both my parents were naturalized citizens, and they gave me opportunities that they could have never even dreamed of. And so in a way, I honor and respect their sacrifice is I think they could do it, I can do it. So I'm always leaning on the love, respect, and strength that my parents gave me to support myself. That's something that gives me a tremendous amount of strength in any kind of when I'm facing any obstacle, whether that was going through graduate school, getting licensed, or just in the professional world. Gerardo is coming up on tenure. You know, this is an arduous process. We go through all these things. Dr. Wentz has already achieved his PhD. He's been a clinician for years. He's one of the best clinicians I've ever seen, and still he has to prove himself over and over and over. And this can be taxing if we let it unsettle us. But we say, okay, we know the song, and we know this dance, and we know how to get through it. And then on top of that, we want to deal with students, you know, making sure we're there for them, providing them what they need, but not giving too much, because we can't do for you. We can only give you the environment to grow in. I know it might seem harsh, and I was doing a lot of grading this week, so I'm sure you guys got a lot of messages from me talking about missing assignments and things. And this is here, I'm here to help you, but I can't do for you. You know, I can't give it to you. When I was at UNLV, I had over 1,000 students. I didn't have time to send individual messages like that. We have this small program here. We have a more personal touch with our students because we don't have as many. And you know, UNLV has more faculty than we have students at GBC. So think about that. You know, the president that knows me by name here. She mentions me in meetings by my first name. The president of UNLV, which I think there was 3 in the 5 years that I was there, and I don't think I ever met one of them face to face. So when I get to see President Helen, she's like, "Hey, Oscar, how's it going?" You know, and of course my dean, you know, we have a good relationship, and there's always things happening here. But I just wanted to, I guess, share more something real than just kind of going through terms and important things. Of course, group therapy is an important modality, but I thought this would be a kind of more fun for me and Dr. Wentz, and then of course, hopefully, it was helpful for you guys to hear some of our experience and attitudes and beliefs and approach to the profession.
So, Deborah, I don't want to let you go today without having an answer for your question. How do you balance your ethos with what makes the patient unique? The balance of your ethos, it's a very, it's a self-process for you. You got to begin asking yourself, how is it that my ethos may interfere with the individual that I'm trying to support? So it becomes then a process of your own to begin understanding where you're standing, where are your ethics, where are your, how do you balance your belief systems, and how you bring that actually into a session. And that requires a lot of work, which I believe everyone at this point is doing beautifully. Because how do I know that? Because you are in a bachelor's degree in human services. That means that there is an interest in you that is driving you to understand more about you. And just kind of picking up from what Mr. Sita was sharing with everyone. The program that you are in provides you with theories and content. The experience that you will engage in later on is what will provide you with real lived experience necessary to discover who you are as well. This is how we are blessed, by allowing ourselves to be changed in relation to the other, in real world. So Deborah, indeed, it requires a self-exploration and the recognition of the other as equal as you are. Two individuals encountering in a bubble that is called a relationship. This is what is called the field theory in Gestalt. How this bubble creates an impact in both of the individuals, or even 3, or even the family. how are we relating to each other? How is it that my elements as an individual come to connect with the other?
Mhm.
How is it that
What possibilities are capable within that dynamic, within that connection? And so because it is therapy, that therapeutic bubble is so unique, it offers us novel and unique ways of being and experiencing it. And that once we've been experienced, we change, and we're never going to be unchanged. And we take those changes out into the world, into our other relationships. So it's such a special way of helping each other, because the change process affects the therapist as well. I think its utility is unending. I was, as Dr. Wentz is talking, I was going through some of the comments, and I really do appreciate them. It was making me smile. And I know there may be some questions we weren't able to answer, but if you guys have things that, I know there were some specifics about your own kind of personal path or your career goals, things like that, you guys can call us. I'll take the time to go with you. You know, what are some different options for you? What are some different pathways to get and meet those goals? I had a call from a student today who had 2 associate's degree and a bachelor's, and she was talking about going back for another associate's. I'm like, you're good to go. What you need to do is apply for licensure now. Okay, you have the experience, you have the training. She had experience in the military, so I encourage that. Without giving too many details away, I just sometimes, because we're both licensed, and I'm licensed in drug and alcohol and problem gambling as well as clinical mental health, I kind of know the ins and outs of those, the board requirements and things like that. So, you know, use us as a resource. Even after graduation, you're welcome to call or email me with questions, and I'll do what I can to help. But also, you know, initiate an investigation of your own. Look for, how am I going to find resources? Go to the board's website, check out what they are saying. If you want to be a therapist, you should, those things shouldn't be left to waiting for others to provide you the answer. Of course, we're here to provide resources to help you find those answers, but you should be looking that up. And every one of you should know your degree program requirements inside and out. I'm glad to do individual advising, but you got to plan for each semester in advance. And you know, those of you who've gone through your first year everybody should be signing up after your first year, should be signing up for Practicum 205, which starts in the fall and then is only offered in the fall. So if you don't take it, you have to wait another year. We already had a Practicum orientation. I think there was about 18 folks there. I know some of you might have missed it. You can email, we have it. We have a video recording that you can watch. Just like this this session, I will be uploaded as well. I try to record as much as I can, so for if anybody misses it, they can go and review the YouTube video. That's the beauty of technology in our day and age. We have lots of different ways of connecting with students, and Zoom's great. And sometimes, you know, videos are good too. There's a good way for us to review information and things like that. And you get to watch it again if you forget, or pause it and take notes, you know, or rewind it. You know, that's the other thing I really like about it. So thanks, Cheryl, for the comment. I really do appreciate everyone's time and attention. Before we sign off, I want to make sure that everyone has the passcode. So going back to my Jeep, the passcode is Jeep 3 times. Put that in your assignment, and that's how you'll get credit for attending this evening's live webinar, and submit that, and then you'll get the points for that. Easy. We just have a nice conversation, and you get, I try to make those worth a lot so you don't have to do the writing assignments. I also want to thank you guys for all the time, energy, and effort you're putting into your coursework. I know it's been a long semester. We've got less than a month to go. Keep up the good work, study, prepare for finals, get good rest, nutrition, and exercise, and then enjoy the summer. So thank you all. Have a great night. And if you need anything, please let me know, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys have. So remember, the password is Jeep, Jeep, Jeep 3 times.
Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. Felicia, I didn't forget your question. Let me talk to Mr. Sita, and I will get back to you, or we both get back to you. I think we will create an announcement in our courses, so everyone will get the information. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And as always, if you have questions, email us. We are an email away. Okay. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.